leading up to that interview. And to be honest, I don't think Evan and I knew for sure if that interview was going to happen until David sat in the chair in front of the camera.
Yeah, sure.
Like he was like on board, but I think it was still just like something that he was really like nervous about, and we were really nervous about as well. But having like Chavo there, he was right there with us, right behind the camera, like with us, and like hearing David's perspective and how he just kind of left it all out, you know, he really opened up in a way, and you can see he gets really emotional, and I think it's important that people see that, and that's why we hang on it for a moment and let you live in that moment, because we really want the audience to really feel it. Like, and I've seen so many comments when people see, you know, there's this moment where he talks about the last weekend he spent with Nancy and Daniel, and that memory really brought up emotional feelings for him, and he breaks down crying. And I think when people see that and the comments that I've been seeing about that moment, it really hits home for people. And I think people can really connect with David by seeing him being so vulnerable, but also being so brave to do that.
Yeah, one thing too, just on that as well, I think that was eye-opening for us. You know, when he finally sat down and committed to the interview, I think it had obviously a very therapeutic effect, I think, for David. But one of the things that became clear, and I've never asked him this, but I just assumed that this was probably one of the first times that he's ever really opened up about this. And I mean, perhaps with anyone. It just had that effect. Like, I'm not sure if that's true or not. It just had the effect of him kind of verbalizing this really for one of the first times. And that, I think, was what led to it being so emotional. But after the interview was over and that it was done, you could just almost see a physical change in him. Like, you could almost see that he was, you know, standing up a little more straight, you know, and like it was very therapeutic for him, I think, to get the weight off of his chest. And one thing he said in some of the interviews he's done in since the show has come out is he said that he's let 13 years of pain go when he sat down in front of that camera, which, you know, lends me to believe that maybe this is one of the first times he's really talked about it. And the next day, I think it was the next day. Yeah, the next day we went to the AEW show where Chris Jericho and company took us backstage, and Chris Jericho, who's interacted with David several times, said the same thing. Like, there's something about you that seems different today. You know, I don't know what it is, but something. And so I think it's had a really positive effect on David, especially being able to finally have some avenue to talk about this.
Well, that's really the cool thing about the episode, is that you try to find a positive, and that this is something where it's really hard to find. I mean, you got to go digging for it, but you guys really did it, and it jumped off the screen. And something else that jumped off the screen that started a little bit of a debate again is JR's stance that Benoit should not be in the Hall of Fame. And it seems silly that we would even have a discussion like this after a personal tragedy, but I'm glad you guys left that in, because I feel like it's something that's still debated a lot online. What did you think of JR's comments, and what sort of feedback have you gotten from that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I think, and also Dean too. I think Dean Malenko has a good perspective on it too, is that, like, you know, as he respects his career and, you know, all the accomplishments he has, but you can't give any accolades to somebody who has perpetrated these crimes. And it goes even deeper into a larger conversation that, you know, society has been having in the last couple of years, which is, you know, separating, you know, can you separate, you know, someone's art from who the artist is, you know, and I just, obviously, you know, it's such a complicated subject, especially when you look at, does he belong in the Hall of Fame? Something even more that, you know, we're definitely going to explore with the Owen Hart episode as well, later on down the line. But I think one of the more interesting things that has emerged from this that I've been seeing, and like, Bully Ray commented on this as well, is the concept of Nancy being in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And that's something that we wanted to pivot towards as well in the episode. And of course, it's like just knowing what a fan like us here knows about the WWE. Can we picture them actually doing that? I don't know, probably not. But if they did, like, imagine just if they just did it. You know what I mean? Like, if they just did it, there has to be no mention of Chris, but they just put Nancy in the Hall of Fame, and that would be such a powerful statement. I almost feel like it's teed up for them to do it now,
I do wonder if they will, though, because I, like you, think they're going to say, well, if we mention her, then that means we could have some bad PR about the way she passed away, and that could affect our shareholders. But I do think that every other non-WWE Hall of Fame that doesn't have some sort of publicly traded piece, they should put Nancy in this year if she's not already in, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, she was such a pioneer for her time, and for us in a lot of ways, when we were going through, especially her Fallen Angel era, like, we just became obsessed with it because it really is like the coolest aesthetic. It's just one of the coolest vibes, and how she like took inspiration from like a Uriah Heep like vinyl cover. Like, we just thought she was so cool, and for us in a lot of ways, it was cooler to feature that stuff than the Chris Benoit like footage or the.
Yeah, and also it's like. To also learn from Sandra that, she really was a creative force behind a lot of that stuff. When it came to those early years with Kevin, like, she had that vision for it. She was rock and roll, she was metal, she loved all that stuff, all that music and that aesthetic, and she really was the one that went out and bought a lot of that stuff, had the ideas of incorporating a lot of those costuming and makeup stuff, and a lot of the aesthetic that's really brought to that image, and even in a lot of the photographs they did. I mean, she was a real, major artist, had a major artistic influence on that stuff, and that stuff is just like, when you go back and you watch all those old promos, or you see photos of her and Kevin like on the beach with like swords, and stuff. It's some of the coolest shit in 80s wrestling, like, hands down.
Well, something else that you guys have really mastered is the reenactments, and I've always been fascinated with your social media postings where you sort of show behind the scenes how that all comes together. And I know it hasn't aired yet, but you had a clip of, I think it's you guys wearing the Road Warrior spikes, climbing down those famous NWA stairs. It's such a cool look. But tell me about, this one with Benoit, the way you cast someone to play Chris Benoit. It's sort of the no-fly zone of professional wrestling, but I think you actually used a professional wrestler to play Chris in the episode.
It was like, our process in putting these reenactments together is, it's so hectic because everything, we're just moving so fast. And, we knew that was, obviously such an important role, telling the story. And the person we turned to play Chris was actually a wrestler named Tyson Dukes, who he's a local wrestler here in Ontario, and obviously he's had an awesome career as well. And we've turned to him to play several other characters before. I think he actually played Dutch Mantel in the Bruiser Brody pilot, and he's played someone else too, hasn't he? I can't even remember. I think he's played somebody else.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He definitely played Dutch, but but he even when we spent time with him doing the Bruiser Brody episode and just in between takes and getting to know Tyson, he told us that he actually met Chris Benoit a couple times backstage. And so he had that connection. He was very inspired by Chris's work that he incorporated into his own wrestling. And so we knew that he had already studied Chris Benoit's work. He would already know the mannerisms, know the move sets. And so when it came time to cast that character, I think he was like the first person we thought of. And he was absolutely down, and he totally got the nuance of it, and the professionalism that had to go behind that, because even on set, it's